Hi everyone, my name is Tanner. I am currently one of the students working on the Capstone project. Welcome all. I am currently working with Noridian as our sponsor. With me I have Devin, William, and Trevor. As stated, Noridian is our team and company. With us we have our sponsors over there. We have Brock, Allison, Joan, and I don't see Nick here, but Nick is also one of our sponsors.
So here's an overview of the company that we're doing this project for. So before I actually go into the company, I think it's helpful to give a little overview of the healthcare system in general and where Noridian fits inside of that. So all of you probably have a primary care physician that you go to at a clinic. You've probably been in a hospital for a surgery. And you probably have a grandparent or know someone who's also in a nursing home. So every single year, these different healthcare entities have to submit a report to a national health insurance program called Medicare to get reimbursed for the services that they provide. What Noridian does is they audit these reimbursement requests before they're actually submitted to the government to make sure that there's no fraud and that there's no errors in those reports. So what they do is they'll have an auditor go through this cost report from a healthcare entity and see if there are any errors. Then, once they've done that, they can submit it to Medicare. During this process, different levels of supervision at Noridian will go through those audits to make sure that the initial auditors didn't make any errors. They'll take these and put them into Excel sheets so that they can track the errors. Managers then use these errors to determine where auditors need more training to ensure that less errors are made and the company can be more efficient. Our job is to go through these Excel sheets and extract the data in them, and then through an automated process, see the trends that are going on so that the managers can use those for training purposes.
Okay, so the people at Noridian that will be using our software will be the supervisors, who are the ones that are actually reviewing the auditors, and also the managers and directors and quality assurance team.
Just to kind of reiterate the problem, a lot of the tracking for the amount of categories that are getting review points, which is an error. If you hear me say a review point or error, they're interchangeable. But to be able to track that, that's all done manually right now. They have their own individual Excel sheets, and then they have one master Excel sheet, and then they have to copy and paste from their own to the master. So what we're going to do is allow them to upload their review point documents and then store all that and then display it in a dashboard that's easy to read, gives them a lot of good insights for training, which is the main goal of this app. Things they would like to do is see which types of errors are getting the most, maybe which month or which span of 6 months is getting the most errors, and that's information that will be really good for them.
So kind of our solution to tackle this is the main thing we initially wanted to do is make sure we can get the data from the Excel sheets. So we essentially will pull the data from these Excel sheets given these certain attributes, those are the specific data that we want, and then be able to use that to figure out what's the top 5 errors, who's potentially making those errors, and be able to distinguish between the supervisor reviews, the manager reviews, stuff like that, as well as Travis said, integrate a user-friendly dashboard to be able to help everyone manage it and kind of display those errors very large and very broad so everyone can kind of get what's going on. Here is an example file that we have. The things bolded in pink are those data that we're kind of getting. So at the top you have those rows to the right. Those are the data we're getting for those. And pretty much everything below this row, that's pink with the point number and the week, that data as well. So that's the data we are pulling.
Now for our schedule, we started out with our first sprint, which was getting to know our sponsors at Noridian and also figuring out what exactly they wanted us to do for them. And then after that, we moved into our second sprint, and then we started actually programming our application, and it is just about to wrap up here on Wednesday, and then we're planning on our Sprint 3 to implement a database as well as some more coding for the features, and then Sprint 4 will be implementing it all, making sure it all operates functionally, and then our final presentation after that. And then some of the features we are going to include is allow users to upload files. We are 90% done with that right now, and then we're going to be populating the data from those audits into a SQL database. We just started that, and we are creating an interface that generates the dashboard for the user. That is at 85% right now. And then our targeted goal for the project is to allow the user to filter monthly, yearly, or by contract with the audits. And then we are on the dashboard, we are displaying the statistics as well as visualizing the data in graphs and pie charts. And then lastly, we're making sure we follow the DISA STIG security guidelines, which is quite a large amount, so we're making sure we don't violate any of those.
So this is actually the working dashboard that we have currently. Nick's not here to recognize it, but this is almost identical to what he uses for his job with IT infrastructure. It looks a lot like his ServiceNow dashboard. So along the top, we will see our top 5 chapters of the IOM that are being violated. So 60.8C11 is getting the most. And then down here, you will be able to scroll. The framework we're using makes scrolling really hard for no reason. So that's the final 15%, by the way. So supervisor review, manager review, and then you'll be able to go down and review all the other ones. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Those are features to come.
So one of the big parts in terms of functionality for a project is actually extracting the data from the Excel sheet. So to do this, we're using the Python programming language, and we more specifically use a package called XLRT. This makes it really easy to extract the data from specific cells within the sheets just using Excel's own indexing system. So what this allows, so basically we're dealing with a couple different types of reviews in these Excel sheets, but they overall have a very similar format. And what I'm going to show you in the following slides is those different formats and then what that data looks like. So here's just a reminder of the image that Tanner showed earlier about the different attributes that we're looking for. So essentially, no matter if you're a supervisor, manager, director, you're almost going to have the same exact type of format. There are 2 exceptions to this. So sometimes you'll have, right under the fiscal year end, you'll have another row that is second level review. So what we've done with our software is that we've implemented functionality that can account for that. And additionally, if there's another level review, a third level review, we have it so that the software can respond to that and still extract all the correct attributes. And then the other one, which I'm going to show at the end, is an intra-office file review, and we still need to implement the logic for that because it's a little bit more complicated. So here's an example of a supervisor review. So what a supervisor is, they're the ones that are reviewing the auditor's work. So this is essentially what you can think of as a first level review. Here we have 9 different rows, and if you go to the next slide, you can see that, and this is actually copy and pasted straight out of our console from our program. It extracts every single attribute from that and puts it into an array object. And the nice thing about this is it allows us to access any position, and what it does, even though there was no second level or third level, it still takes those into account. So no matter what type of review you have, you always get the same type of array, which makes data manipulation super easy because you only need to know like one format to be able to extract the type of data that you want and manipulate it. So all your methods work for the data, no matter what type of review sheet you have. So you can see here that it extracts all the data. Well, I guess it's kind of hard to see because it's small. But I'll show you a more clear version in the next example. So here's another supervisor review, same type as the previous one. And then as you can see here, we have our rows. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have the 6 there. So you want to go over. And you can kind of see here a little bit more clearly, but you can see that it has all those different attributes. So it takes those first 6 attributes and puts those in every single object from that sheet, so you know the reviewer that did them, the person that was being reviewed, the type of review that it was, the fiscal year end date, which is constant for all those, and then it appends that to the individual errors in each of the rows. And then we also account, again, for the third level review, second level review. Since there was no, can you go back to the example? No, there you go. So in this case, there was no second level review or third level review, but it still took that into account and made sure that was clear in the data. So here's a director review, and you can see it essentially does the same thing. You have five rows here, and then if you go to the next slide, you see that there's also 5 rows of output. And essentially it's the same format essentially, so it's super easy to manipulate. Okay, and then the next one. Okay. So for manager review, you have something a little bit different. So in this case, you do have a second level review, and what you can see in the next slide is that in this case, so they just have manager's review as a default for that second level review. Well, you can see that we actually take that into account. So in the previous one right here, it said no second level review, but now since there was a second level review, it did take that information and act it differently, but it was the same program that did it, because our program's able to respond to those different data types and put those into the error array so that it's easy to manipulate. So this is the last one that we have to implement functionality for. It's the inter-office file review, and the logic for this one's going to be a little bit different because, as you can see, there's an extra blank space here, so you need to account for that, and then the data is put on different lines. So we do need to still add the logic and functionality in for this, because it is a little different. So in terms of data manipulation, since we do have standard arrays that are the same for basically everything, it makes data manipulation super easy. Right now we have methods that can manipulate data based on error type and date, but because it's so easy to manipulate this, we could do this for fiscal year end date, we could do it even for the hospital name, the number of review points, we literally could do it for anything. And we can also combine those to return basically anything that the user would want. So the way we set up our error array, it makes it super easy to do this and very versatile. So here's an example of the actual filtering. And again, these 2 examples are directly copy and pasted from our console. So you can see here, if you want to return an error type with that, it'll go through all the data from the sheets, and then it returns the errors that specifically have this error type. So you can see here, both of these have that error type. It'll go through all that data and do that for you. And then this one's a little harder. So let's just say to C. But basically you have, if you want it between those dates, and the date filtering right now is inclusive, you can see that it returns every single error with that date. And like I said earlier, you can do that for basically anything in that array, which makes it really versatile and useful for managers if they want to get into the nitty-gritty. So in terms of security, since we've been focusing on developing primarily, security has kind of been not the first thing on our minds, but what we're going to do in the following weeks is that we're going to focus more on it. Some things that we have planned now to ensure that our software is secure, in addition to following the DISA states, which are just security guidelines, we are going to make sure that we're going to use predefined options and try to limit the amount of options that a user can actually select to try to get more predefined ones so that they can't inject anything. And then also making sure that the database is separate from, try to separate the database from the front end as much as possible to make sure that no injection attacks can occur.
Just a note too, we avoid a ton of DISA state guidelines by making a desktop application. If it were to be a web app, dashboard, anything like that, we would have a lot of guidelines. So we skip out on a lot of those. So some issues and risks, obviously security, like we mentioned. He says we don't really take it into account, but if it's on the edge, we have to, change something. It is kind of in the back of our mind with every line of code. You're right. We're working with very sensitive healthcare data, provider information, all that. So none of that can be released. Another issue, I would say more of a risk than an issue, the programming language. We're all familiar with Python, which we decided to use, but we haven't built a project at this scale. It's a pretty verbose project. But Python has a pretty shallow learning curve, so we picked up pretty quick. It's got a ton of good libraries for data visualization, data extraction, visualization, if I haven't said that yet. So it's been really good in terms of that. It just took a little bit longer than it would have if we would have used Java to make it. And just the depth of the project, our finalized requirements. We have high level of detail all the way down to very low level of detail that we need to get to. So being able to parse everything that we're pulling from our Excel sheets, it's going to take a lot to filter that, but Will and Tanner have done a great job thus far.
Kind of looking back at where we are at with this project as well as what we've done. The solid prototype we have for the dashboard is working really well, and with that foundation we can make a lot off it. It allows us to open a lot of doors and kind of go down different paths of what we want to do with it, and that was only really possible because we got our requirements fully finalized last week and kind of pushed us in the direction that this final project wants to go. So that really will help us move along a lot quicker and kind of speed up the pace that this project is going on. We get development going a lot quicker.
So next steps, make it so you can scroll on the dashboard. Everything's currently in the dashboard. You just want to see what's falling below the bottom of the screen. So currently working on a workaround for that. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. We need more back-end methods. Like Will said, our inter-office review, that's a little bit different than the other reviews, so we need to write code for that and make it do that, which should be no problem. Polish the uploaded document page. Should be relatively easy. We just threw something together that worked. It's functional, but it's not really fashionable, I guess. And actually, stretch goal, we may not have an upload page. We might pull the Excel straight from the directory on their shared drive, which would make it even easier for them. But due to time constraints, that's a stretch goal. And then lastly, we want to make the dashboard interactive. Currently, it just displays statistics. You can't do anything with it. You can't look further. So that's what's coming up. And if you go to the next slide, you will see, boilerplate. You've seen it 100 times online. You just browse your file system, pick your file, upload it, and then our program will do what it's supposed to do. And then here's the mock-up. It looks almost identical to the working prototype, except for this little scroll bar right there. Again, top 5 categories, a little button to view a more detailed view, and then you saw this on the last one, but the pie chart, again, top 5 visualized. It's a little bit easier to read. You can just, right there you see it. Oh, obviously that one has the most. Top reviewers, so you can see which supervisors, in this example it's a supervisor review, so you can see which, top 5 supervisors. We could show more or less if you want to, but you can see they're signing the most review points, and then that should lead to a more detailed view as well, eventually, to see which auditors or in charge is getting those reviews. So that would be another lower level. Over there you see the bar chart by month. I just did it, so you can see which months are the most errors are occurring. And then another goal too is to filter that to a more specific timeline. So if you only wanted to see a certain period of time. If you wanted to look at a period of time before they did training, and then look at a period of time after they did training to see, did this actually make a difference training. That will be something that users will do with the final product. And then down below, just some general stats. Most review again. Month with the most, which you can see in the bar chart, but it's just written out there. Average points per month. Section with the most again. Reviewer with the most again. These are just lists of things that are visualized clearly. But another thing that they want to keep track of is the average time to clear review points. So again, they're issued review points when they make an error, but then it's sent back to the auditor to correct that work. So they do want to see the amount of time it has taken to clear those, which is also getting pulled from the Excel sheet. So that's the data we have. And a little Q&A.
Confidence level for getting everything done?
In a percentage, 90 probably. I think most of it should be pretty doable. I think we're pretty clear that our stretch goals are stretch goals, but I think our requirements now are all doable. Very doable.
That's a good answer.
From the sponsors, you don't want to grill us anymore? Make it look better.
So, and another level he's mentioned was you can click on the reviewer.
Yeah,
thing
reviewer,
and get
yeah.
the honors.
Yep, so, and that was in our requirements too, was be able to see which people are making the errors, not the people issuing the errors, because you need to know, to train those people. You know, you might not want to obviously invite everybody to training, make this one guy do a training module because he keeps making an error in this section. So, yeah, that's there in the requirements, it just wasn't mocked up.